Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Down Low. My name is Mike Dorezzo. With me, as always, is my buddy Joel Lowe. Joel, say hello.
Hello, toodaloo. Good morning.
Toodaloo. Toodaloo. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good
Bienvenidos.
afternoon. Yeah,
Uh, Joel, it's late August. It's it's storm prep season,
it
right?
is.
And uh, you know, we, in the cybersecurity world, we have to have things called incident response plans. And they need to be refreshed every year just to kind of
Mhm.
put eyes on them. And so I was thinking this morning, let's talk about that, right? Like let's how does
Sure.
that translate? What is an incident response plan? How does that translate to other people out who aren't in IT and IT security? And what do you need to look for, right?
Right, right.
So let's start off with an incident response plan. So Joel, you got any thoughts on that? You want me to start off on that?
Either way, it doesn't matter.
All right.
I
All
usually
right.
kick it off. Go ahead. You start it off.
All right. All right. All right. So I'll start off. So incident response plans are literally plans, right? They're documents that help companies organize their thought, their processes when they encounter an event or something that is adverse to their business, right?
Right.
So if something knocks out their internet, it doesn't even need to be something like an internet attack or malware or things like that. It could just be something that impacts business, right?
Right.
And that borders what they also call a disaster recovery plan, but that's a little bit
Mhm.
different. That actually gets you back to operational. Let's talk about incident response plan, right? So usually, we have a general section, right, where it says, let's define what an incident is.
Mhm.
Because sometimes it's just a thing, right? That's just a thing. It's a phishing email.
It's an
No
event.
one fell
Right.
for it. It's an event.
Right.
But to your point, the word incident actually has legal connotations in
Correct.
IT and in business. So some regulatory compliance frameworks actually have definitions for the word incident, and
Yep.
certain things have to happen once you call something an
An
incident,
incident.
right? You
Right.
you have to report things. You have to
Mhm.
tell people. You have to report them to regulatory bodies. So having that plan, basically the first part says, hey, if this happens and it hits this criteria, we have to do these things, right?
Right.
The second part is communication. Who needs to know? How often do they need to know? What do they need to know,
Mhm.
right? So your senior leadership should be aware that something happened, right?
Right.
And then what my friend Skip Goodwill used to say, feed the beast. You constantly have to feed the upload of information to them
Correct.
just so that they're aware of what's going on,
Right. Right.
and how that may adversely impact them. And then, as you talked about defining it, communicating it, what are you doing to it, right? Like, how are you
Right.
responding to it? And there are different ways to respond to different things.
Right.
So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about it, and I think we're going to start off with the personal side, right? So we talked about storms.
Right.
It's hurricane season. So you had a good point. You said, what's your plan for losing power for an hour versus a
Right.
day versus a week? So take us through that train of thought there.
Right. So each one of them is different, right? So you can think you have a plan, right? I think
Mhm.
Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth, right?
Yeah, they get
So,
punched in the
uh,
face.
my thing is your plan may be sufficient for an hour or a couple of hours, right? That you
Right.
currently have in your mind, right? But what happens if it goes for a day, right?
Right.
And it's in the middle of the summer and you have
Right.
no air conditioning, right? Your food is in the refrigerator. It's only going to last for so long. Like, what is your plan, right? Water is only going to last for so long. You're only going to have so many flushes, right? Before now you're not being able to even flush your
Right.
toilet, right? For a
Right.
day. Then let's move for a week, right? So if it's a week, then it's a serious disaster that not only affected you, but everybody around you in your surrounding areas.
Right.
So then you now have to think about, you can't say, well, we're just going to go to a hotel, right? We're not going to say, you can't say, well, we're going to leave and go somewhere else because the roads may be messed up, right?
Right.
Because you're talking about a
Right.
week,
Trees
right? So,
down.
it's
Yeah.
trees down, things going on that nature. Do you have a plan, right? So I say that because I can remember in Atlanta, my cousin, his wife and son were stuck on the highway, and this is a couple of
Oof.
years ago. It was a huge snowstorm, and it's bumper to
Mm.
bumper traffic, right? And what was
Yeah.
going on was people were leaving their cars, so you couldn't get around, right? People were running out of gas,
Right.
so he jumped on his four wheeler and
Right.
drove 3 miles to go pick up his wife and son. And as he was leaving, so many people were trying to stop him to be like, hey, I'll pay you to come back and get me, right?
Right.
But again, he had a plan, right, of how I'm going to get there to get them. I'm pretty sure he didn't think he'd ever have to ride down a highway to go get it. But again, having certain tools and things in place
Right.
to be able to keep your family safe, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to go back to with the definition, right?
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
most
Go for it.
that's the most important thing.
Right.
Those two things you talked about, the definition and communication, right?
Mhm.
And I can tell you why. So definition, you really have to make sure you understand what is an incident, right? And that's why you heard immediately me be like, or invent, right? So
Or
events
event.
happen all the time, right? And I learned the hard way that if you say incident, right, uh, you are held to a higher standard of requirements that you have to do, which costs
Yeah.
money, when all
Yeah.
it was an event, right? So being
Right.
able to change people's thinking on, hey, that's not an incident, that's an event, right? Because even from a legal standpoint, if one of your executives send an email saying, hey, what's going on with this incident? I just heard about it. You have to immediately go back and be like, it's not an incident,
Not an
it's an
incident.
event.
Right.
We're currently looking through some things. It hasn't been deemed an incident. And you have
Right.
to do that from a legal standpoint, or you're held on the clock now. And
Right.
there are
Right.
some requirements with third parties that say you have to let me know within a certain amount of time when you have an incident, right?
Right.
And then they could come back later, right, and pull that information and say, hey, at this time, your CFO sent you something asking about this incident, and you said, hey, let me tell you what's going on. So at that moment, you were on
It
the
was an
clock.
incident.
It was an
Yeah.
incident, right?
Yeah.
So make sure you understand, and then it dovetails into communication, right? So
Right.
I always say when I have a incident or even an event, I give time frames. Hey, I'm going to
Mhm.
talk to you at 9 o'clock. I'm going to talk to
Mhm.
you at 4 o'clock, right? Those are the two times. You're going to get all the information I have for you at 9 o'clock and at 4 o'clock, right?
Right.
And be punctual and give them everything you get. Hey, in the morning, you should be giving them all the information about what went on overnight. Hey, last time I talked to you at 4, I was telling you that we are going to have some servers come in. We're going to have a contractor come in to help rebuild everything. We're looking through our backups and whatnot. This is what happened over the night, right? We're able to
Right.
restore this many systems. We're able to look at this. We're still planning on doing X, Y, and Z, right?
Right.
Any questions, right? Hey, Joe, how long is it going to take us to get up to full running? Well, we got half of the system up. We're working from the backup here. We're doing this here. Hey, we'll have our next update at 4 o'clock, and I plan on having a lot more information. Hopefully, we'll have some good news for you. Okay, Joel, that
Right.
sounds good. And at that point, what that does for them, they know that they're not going to get any more information from me until 4 o'clock, right?
Leave
So that
Joel
gives
alone. Let him
that
do what
that
he needs
means
to do.
let me do my job, so I don't have to keep getting phone calls about, hey, where are we at with this? What's going on with that? At 4 o'clock, I promise you, I'm gonna give you everything you want. Right? Communications, right? Marketing. Nobody has to call me. They all are on the call at 4 o'clock and
Right.
at 9 o'clock. Right. And that's where they
Right.
can ask all their questions. Hey,
Yeah.
Joel, I want to put a press out release about this. What do you think about this? Hey, let me get that information for you. I think we can say this here, but I want to make sure that's clear. Hey, legal, I want you to review it as well. Like, everybody's on the call, right? So it's
Right.
one clear mind. Everybody gets to hear everything. And then when I get off, I only have one thing I have to do, right? It's
Right.
get us back to where we need to. But I can then go and say, okay, hey, we need to get this over to such and such because they want to release something, right? So send it to this person and this person, legal and marketing, right? And communications. Appreciate that.
And that
That's one
and
task I can go ahead.
oh, and you bring up a good point. There are people who are in charge of communication, right? Like, you are in
Hmm.
charge of communicating from an IT perspective
Right.
outward to the company. But there also has to be somebody involved. And you said somebody's going to put out a press release. There's one voice, right, from a company. To have one person be that one voice, right? Be that
Right.
point person for that incident, right? And if it's a legal issue, let it be legal. If it's just a, hey, we're running into something, it could be communications, marketing, whatever
Right.
you call them. If it's a serious matter, it should be senior leadership, like the CEO, COO,
Right.
what somebody who's trained in speaking in front of a crowd of people and answering
Right.
questions. You have a really good point there.
And then watch how we move it to your personal life, right? So we
Right.
have this document, right, that I can pick up and say, okay, this is what it says, A, B, C, D, right? What we do when we have an incident. Do you have a document at home, right? Because let's
Right.
say that an incident happens and you fall and hit your head, and
Right.
you're not able to go over everything that was in your head that you planned out, right? You knew that, hey, I got batteries over here, extra water over here, all this stuff. Where you're hurt, right?
Yeah.
Does your wife, your kids, somebody else can pick up something and say, hey, I see Joel has, batteries over here. We need to get those. Water's over here,
Right.
bandages over here, like extra food and canned goods are here. And not to be like a doomsday's prepper, right? But you just
Yeah.
never
No, no,
know when
no.
something can happen, right? So even if you don't have something written down, right? Did you tell somebody? Did you tell your wife, like, hey, here's where the extra stuff is. This cabinet
Right.
here is all for, if something goes wrong, right?
Well, and
Um,
it doesn't need to be a storm. I mean, you just something bad happening to heaven forbid to you.
right,
Do your loved ones know where documentation is, right? Like I've got a safe with, it's my insurance papers. So if something
hmm,
happens to me, my wife knows where to get the insurance papers to
right,
start. What's the process to start that? Where are all my investments? And conversely, something happens to her, where are all her investments, her 401ks that she had, and what's the name of the company? Who's the contact
right.
person for that?
Who's your point of
You know,
contact? Right,
that's an incident response plan. It's an incident response plan. Hopefully, you never need to use, but
right,
it's an
right,
incident response plan. So,
right.
yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, you
Communicating
can
it
even
out,
use it from the
right?
standpoint of like, what if you come home and somebody's robbed you?
Right,
Right. Where's your incident response for that? Right. Like,
right,
okay, I called the cops, but then do you have documentation of all your stuff that was taken? Right.
right.
I know how I heard somebody say that every now and then periodically to their house they take pictures on their phone.
Yeah, I do that. So I had a
Right.
house fire when I was 18. My parents' house burnt down to the ground, like everything, foundation. And we had to prove to the insurance company that we had these items. And it's
Right.
like, oh, how are we going to do that? All of our pictures were in the house, and they're like,
Right.
well, family, friends, and so literally we had family friends send us photos of what the house looked like and items in the house. Some of them are old, some of them were outdated, and things like that. And so we had to document that. You hit a certain point where the insurance company's like, all right, you've maxed out. Here's the money, right?
Right.
So but that's it. So like before I leave the house on vacation, I take a picture. I said it sounds stupid, and you
Mm-mm.
delete them afterwards, but I
Right.
take a picture of what different rooms in the house in case that happens, right?
Right.
I make sure that a lot of stuff I buy online, so those receipts are in a folder in my email. But
Right.
anything else, I've got a folder in the cloud for purchases and things like that. Large purchases, the small incidental things that I don't worry about, but anything more than $150, I make sure I have some kind of receipt or
And that's smart.
documentation for it.
That's super duper smart.
So,
Right. I
but
just
yeah,
think that's
I'm
something
one of
that,
those people
yeah.
that takes
Yeah.
pictures.
That's smart. Take a picture,
Yeah,
right? And just every now and then, just go through and take pictures. I think before vacation is spot on, right?
yeah,
I'm gonna start doing that because I didn't think about that, but I try to remind myself every now and then, just take a picture of how the house is, because
yeah.
again, think about that frustration of trying to find pictures of your stuff to prove that you had something when you have
Right,
nothing now because it's
right,
all been burnt up.
right,
Insurance companies are there to help you,
right.
yeah, per se,
It's a
right?
business, right?
It
They're
is a
they're a
business,
business. They're in
right?
the business of being in a business. So,
Right.
yeah,
So if you have those pictures already, you just send them over. Yep, got that
right,
for you. It was 3 months ago, but hey, it's still relevant, right?
right.
So
So,
go ahead.
no, so we talked about the definition, right? Hey,
Yep.
this is, and so just translating into real world, right? Is this a bad storm? Right?
Mm,
Is this going to be a really bad storm? Is this a
right.
bad storm? Is this something I need to be worried about? Is this something I should be prepared for? Right? And that's kind of like the real world, the communication. If something bad happens, how do you communicate with the family that you live with? How do you communicate with family members who care about you, friends and family outside of the area that say,
Right.
I can't get a hold of them? You know, I hate to bring it up for those of you who are old enough to remember, but 9/11. If you knew somebody in New York City, you weren't calling them on 9/11,
Sure
right?
wasn't.
If you knew somebody in DC, you weren't calling them on 9/11. The cellular communication towers were done. They were roasted.
Right.
And everybody called 911. So what's your communication plan, right? And
Right.
so usually you're going to call one person and have that person on the outside of the incident area call everybody else, right? Or you're going to
Correct.
send one email if you've got internet. Hey, I'm okay. I've got power. I've got internet. We're all good. But if all you have
Right.
is a cell phone, call one person, have that person communicate to the rest of the family, have them post it on Facebook or someplace where everybody else go, oh, okay, they're okay. I don't need to worry about them. I think that's a really, you bring up a really good point, right? That communication is key, even
It's
for
super,
personal stuff.
super the key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It has to be.
let's talk response, right? And
Mhm.
dealing with a blizzard is different than dealing with a hurricane, is different than dealing
Correct.
with a pandemic, right?
Correct.
What does that look like, right? So we're not out of the pandemic yet. Let's assume that an incident could just be everybody in your household gets COVID.
Correct.
What are you going to do, right?
Right.
So just thinking through these things. You don't have to have an answer for everything, right? I don't expect, like I joked. I said you don't need to be Batman, punch everything, right? You don't have
Right.
to have a plan
Right.
for everything, but just
Right.
think these things through, right? I remember 3 years ago, I remember talking to companies and writing their incident response plan and disaster recovery plans and business continuity plans. And I would talk about pandemic and everybody would, that'll never happen. Oh, 3 months
Until it
later, I kid you
does.
not, it was November and I was getting a bid on a business continuity contract. And I brought that up and they're like, I don't think we need to worry about that. It's like flooding. I'm on top of a mountain. You're like, you could still have your water sprinkler system burst and
Right.
flood your data center. Like, you take this seriously. It
Right.
happens.
Right.
And they were like, a pandemic. Who writes a plan for that? Everybody
Yeah.
should write a plan
Everybody
for that.
should. And if they don't, they have one now.
They have one now. Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't want to be writing the incident response plan while you're in
In the
the
incident.
incident, right? Right?
Hey,
It's
that is a nugget of wisdom right there. Right. That
that's
is
a
not.
nugget of wisdom, right? That's an earned nugget. Don't be the
That
guy
was a
writing the
freebie right
plan.
there. That was a
No,
freebie, guys.
you're welcome. You're
You're
welcome.
welcome. You're welcome.
So basics, right? And you had a good point about gasoline. So if you're coming into a storm like a hurricane or something like that.
So I fill up both cars, right? I fill up both cars. I don't know why everybody runs out and get milk and bread. I don't know what that is, what you're making with
Right.
milk and bread, but I fill up both
French
cars,
toast.
and then I will fill up the bathtubs with water. So I'll clean them out
Yeah.
and fill them up with water, because if worst case scenario, I can at least warm up that water and drink it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I can cook with it and whatnot if I can't get to the store or whatnot. So that is something to think about, because again, I know if both cars are full, I have at least 900 miles right between
Right.
the two of them that I can drive to figure out
Right.
what's going on.
And you can always
I
siphon gas out of one, right?
to put in the other one, correct. And then also having gas or kerosene for like your heater if it's in the middle of the winter time, or for your chainsaw, right, so that you
Yeah.
can help clear these roads and do things. I'm
Yeah.
in the country and we all
Yeah.
kind of pitch in, right? We jump on our tractors, you grab your chainsaw, and it's all hands on deck, right? You're moving stuff out the roads to kind of get people back to where they need to. If it's a snowstorm, we're all trying to pave the roads and help things out. We're not waiting on somebody to come and do it, right?
Yeah.
And you see that in the country. We don't have the luxury of up north where they have a system together to be able to help clear roads a lot better because they deal with snow. Here,
Right.
we think about snow, we shut down, right? It's
Right.
like they said it might snow and everything shuts down.
Right.
Go
Right.
home,
Right.
right? So that's an incident response plan in itself, right? You need to understand how to deal with when everything shuts down,
Right.
and how you're going to navigate around to get certain places. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 100% with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and so, like, personal, like, shelter, right, is where
Yep.
you're staying going to be safe through whatever incident or issue you're going to, right?
Right.
Food, right? Food and water. Those three things are the basic tenets of supporting life, right? You need food. Yeah, you
Mhm.
can go a couple hours without water. You can go a couple days without food. You can't go very far without shelter in a bad storm. So,
Right.
those three things are first. Batteries,
Mhm.
heat in
Batteries
the
are so important.
wintertime. Oh, it's so important.
And
Heat
it's
in
the
the
things you
wintertime,
don't think about.
fans. Yeah.
Right. Fans, right?
Fans in the summertime. Your air
Mhm.
conditioning is not going to work, but you might get enough battery juice and things like that out of fans.
Yeah.
to work. You know, if you have a portable battery system that
Oh,
you can charge
the
and
worst
things
time
like
to
that.
go buy a generator is when you need one.
Oh yeah, during a storm. Yeah,
It's the worst time,
don't do it.
right?
Don't do it.
They're going to be super expensive, right? You then have to go to all these different places. So you go to the hardware store and
Yeah,
pick up the generator. You got to go to the
yeah,
gas station and get the gas for it. You got to
yeah,
just too much, too much.
yeah.
You
And
should already
if
have
you're
one.
if you're thinking about it, like go and get help to pick that out and do that. Those things are dangerous. People don't understand how dangerous those things are. That's a box that can generate thousands of watts of energy,
Hmm.
right? You mess around that in the wrong way, it's got gasoline, it is generating electricity. It's a
Yep.
bomb waiting to go off if you don't know what you're doing, right? And
Or,
there's certain
or
things you just can't plug into it.
or the fact of I've seen where people had it inside the house.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
and ended up having a serious issue, right? Because it's
Carbon
pushing out
monoxide
carbon
poisoning.
dioxide, right? So you got everything hooked up to it. You're in one room and you shut the door and it's just running and there's no
Yeah,
ventilation.
yeah,
And it's sad to say that people don't make it from that, right? Carbon
yeah.
dioxide is not your friend, right?
Right.
So
No, you go for
again,
the long sleep.
understanding how to use these tools, how to use
Yeah,
the because they're only good as the users, right?
right.
So you can have the best. We talked about this, right? So you can have the best plan, right? I have a data center. I have a backup data center, right? I
Right.
have failover. It's a hot site, meaning that if something happens to one, immediately the other one kicks in. All
Right.
sounds
Within
good. We're paying the good
seconds.
money in seconds, right? So our business will be fine, but it's only 10 miles from each other.
Right. Yeah.
So, so if the same incident that happens to that data center, what's the likelihood that it may happen 10 miles down the road to the other one?
Pretty
Huh.
likely.
I never thought about that, right? So it's the
Yeah.
best intentions, right? You're doing all the things, right? But you have to look at the geographical location, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about how I'm in one city and my mom's in another city, right?
Hmm.
So if something happens to me, I may go to her house or she may come to
Right.
my house, right? Because
Right.
hopefully the same event has not happened to both of us, right? Because
Right.
then we're stuck, right? But hopefully she
Right.
has power, I can get to her or vice versa. Um, so it just depends, right? You need
Yeah.
to plan, and again, have some kind of idea and have some kind of conversation. Like we
Yeah.
talked about how at school they go over, hey, tornado drills or fire drills, and then your kid comes home and is like, hey, what is our drill to get out the house, or how do we do this? And
Right.
you're like, I'm not okay.
Oh.
Let's work on it, right? So
Right. Yeah.
this is where we shelter in place, right? You figure that out, and this is how we get out, and things of that
Right.
nature, which is good, right? But you didn't have that in your thought until it's too late, and that's the wrong
Right.
time in the middle of the incident to start planning, right?
Right.
As we stated before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's a good resume building exercise.
So you mentioned something else earlier before the recording. Have something to occupy your time that doesn't require power. So deck of
Yes.
cards, crossword. So nothing will induce panic than letting your mind and imagination erode away at you. So having something to occupy your time and your sanity, super
Hmm.
important. It doesn't require electricity or batteries, right? So it
Right.
can't be your iPad, it can't be your
Right.
phone, it can't be this, it can't be the internet, can't be, so what do you have?
Right.
Old school paper books and everything else that will occupy your time. That was a really good one.
Right.
Um,
And
so let's
then
talk.
cutting off your phone, right? So
Yeah,
you don't need your
yeah,
phone on the whole time, right? Because you only have so much juice, right? So
right,
use it sparingly, right? Cut it
yeah,
on to make a phone call or do
right,
something, then cut it off, right? Because it's gonna power down, and then you don't have
right,
anything,
and
right?
then you're
So
out.
th-
Yeah,
those little things, like you don't think about it because you're always on your phone, but you
right,
may want to cut that off, right? So
right,
just little things, think through,
right.
and if you do that, it'll help you out.
Yeah. So let's talk takeaways.
Takeaways.
So you're right. We need the little graphic that comes up. Just
Takeaways,
takeaway.
takeaways. Yeah.
All right. So
Have a
why don't you start? You had a really good one.
yeah, have a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you
Or
plan to fail,
you
right?
plan to fail. Yeah.
So a
So
decision is it no decision is a decision, right? I used to hear that
right,
all the time. So have a plan because believe it or not, you have a plan now, right? Your
right,
plan is to you don't have one, so you're gonna muddle your way through, right? And that's
right.
never good, right?
Never good.
Plan. just write some stuff out, jot something through, or just have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
That'd be fun. Sit down with
Yeah.
your wife, your significant other, your kids, and have a conversation. If something
Mm.
happened right now, what would we do?
Right.
Right? Do you know where the batteries are? Do you know where the first aid kit is? Do you know who to call? Like, what would we do? Right?
Right.
And just see what everybody says. That's a fun little game, huh? And then you kind of put it together and be like, no, I think we should go here because it doesn't have any windows, right? We'll be
Yeah.
safer. Hey, I think we should do this. And you kind of just map it out, so that
Yeah.
everybody's on the same page. So even if something happens and you're not there, they know what to do,
They know
right?
where to go. What do you mean
Right,
we have 30 days of food behind the stairwell? I didn't know about
right,
that. You're like,
right.
yeah, probably should have told you about that.
Should have told you
And the
that.
camping
Yeah,
stove. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
And the
and you know
sleeping
what?
bags.
So the camping stove, and everybody, well, I say everybody, a lot of people have grills, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can use your gas grill to
Yeah.
cook on, not just because of cookouts, right? You can cook on it for any time, right? It
For
is
any
a
time.
stove.
Middle of the
So
winter.
middle of the
Right.
winter, you can just cook on it. So it's a beautiful
Right.
thing, right? Also, I think I like disasters to happen in the winter versus the summer, right? That's just
Yeah.
me, right? I can
Yeah.
take my food and I can put it outside. It's cold. I don't
Right.
have to worry about
Right.
it, right? In the
And I
summertime, you
can go
can't
over
do that,
Joel's
right?
house and take his food because I know he leaves it outside. So
It's
that's
perfectly all
my
right,
plan.
right? But I keep it good. You can put snow in your chest to
Yeah.
just so much things you can do. And to stay warmer, I think is easier than trying to stay cooler, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you only
Yeah.
take off so much before, right? You have nothing
Yeah.
else to take off, right? You're still hot.
Exactly. And then you're
Yeah,
just hot and sweaty and naked.
it's just
Yeah.
hot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not in a good way either.
And smelly because you've been
It's
not
smelly.
showered for 3 days. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
um
Hey.
take your kids camping, guys.
Yeah.
Make sure your family knows what camping looks
Go
like.
go
They'll have a
glamping.
better appreciation of life. Um,
Right.
so having several plans for several different issues, I
Mhm.
think, like you said,
Right.
a disaster in the wintertime is different than a disaster in the summer, in the spring.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I, I like test your plan. That's a big
Ooh,
one
yeah,
for
yeah.
me is, hey, you have
Yeah.
a plan. Yeah, I've got batteries. You're like, oh, when was the last time you bought batteries?
Hmm.
Few years. Like, oh, do you think they're still good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
So test your batteries, make sure your batteries are fresh. Keep stuff charged every once in a while. A lot of times if you have like those backup batteries or those spare batteries that you use
Uh-huh.
for your cell phone and things like that, they do require charging every once in a while. The battery does degrade and over
Mhm.
time. So just every once in a while, just remember charge them. Once a quarter, just charge up your stuff just to make sure you have a little bit of juice or something.
Yeah.
Um, I've got one of those hand crank emergency radios.
I was just about to
I'm
say
a
that the hand
minor
crank.
yeah, I'm a minor doomsday prepper.
Okay.
Obviously if
All
it
right.
hits the fan, I'm probably, level 1 out. But
Yeah.
I have something that I can generate electricity on. I have something I can listen to radio on. It's solar powered and things like that. At least I
Yeah.
can understand what's going on with the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when the zombies come for me, and they'll come for me, I at least know when and where, so I'll be prepared for it.
Nice.
But
Nice.
yeah, so Joel, any other final takeaways? Any kind of nuggets of knowledge you want to?
Nah, hey, knowing is half the battle, man.
No one is half the
Not a
battle. So I
G.I.
will say
Joe.
this: as a consultant, and through my 20-something year career, I've seen a lot of stuff happen. Um,
Right.
we had a fire. Our fire suppression unit at one of my companies caught fire in the data center. I'll say that again. The fire suppression unit caught fire.
So the thing that's supposed to
And
put out fire caught fire.
yeah, caught fire. Which was
Okay.
awesome. Luckily, it didn't burn the data center down or the building with it because the data center was in the building at the time. But
Wow.
it released gases and everything else that were dangerous to human beings and caused cancer.
Yeah.
And the fire department called the executive assistant to the CEO. She comes in, she's half awake at 4 o'clock in the morning. And she's like, "Oh my God, the building, there's firefighters everywhere."
Right. Right.
No one read the disaster recovery plan. No one read this.
Right.
I got in at 8:30 and I'm like, "Don't we have a DR plan?" And they're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, probably should have looked at
Yeah.
that." Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
don't have one, do we? But after that, we kind of hey, test the backups, right? And
Yep.
I think you mentioned something earlier. Hey, at 4 o'clock, I will know where we are and stuff like that. If you're
Hmm.
testing, your plan and things like that, you should know what the timing is. It's going to
Hmm.
take me 2 to 4 hours to get these systems up. It's going to take 3 to 4 hours to get these systems up. Here's the order that we're going to get them up in
Right.
based on priority. And so
But
when
that's the
somebody
key.
calls you, that's
That's
the
the
key.
key. Priority, right?
Priority.
The business has to tell you what the priority is, right? They have
Right.
to tell you what's important to them, right?
Right.
As a security person, I don't determine that. I keep everything safe, right?
Right.
IT will get it back up, but they don't know which one to get up first, right? You have to
Right.
let them know. For our business, we need these systems here. And then what
Right.
happens, they can now say, okay, here are the systems that support that to get that done, right? And
Right.
that's the first thing we're going to do, right?
Right.
So
And
you
and
got
it
to make sure
depends on the time of the year too, right? Because certain systems
facts.
become very important at certain
Correct.
times of year, and then whatever,
Uh,
just whatever you get it
okay.
around to it.
Right.
Payroll.
Right.
Payroll's not important until the day people get paid. And
That
then
is
it
true.
becomes the most important thing that you can do. So I usually tell
Right.
people, like, get your payroll at least in a state where you can move on it if you need to,
Right.
because if you may not know how long you're going to be down for in some
Correct.
cases. So just making sure you have a plan so people know that they will get paid and
Right.
continue to work, and
Right.
so
Right.
people don't think
Hey,
about that. They're like,
again,
what do you think the most important thing is? And some people say email, and you're like, why do you say that? You're like, because I use it all day long. You're like, okay, would you use it if I told you you weren't going to get paid? And they're like, no. And I'm
no,
like, so payroll is the most important thing.
it is. It's the most important thing. I think to leave people with always remember uh, there's a different recovery or a different plan for if you only lose power for a couple hours, you
Yeah.
lose it for a day, or you lose it
Yeah.
for a week. So remember
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
Once you get to a week, things hurt, right?
And
It's
I
a
always like
hard.
telling people knowing is half the battle.
Knowing is
That's,
half the
that's
battle.
my,
G.I. Joe, baby.
just,
Yes.
just for the record, that's Joel's motto, not my motto, in case we
Hey,
get
I
sued.
love it. I love it. Come see me. Come see me.
Come see Joel. Actually, so it's on this screen. Joel. Um, all right. Joel, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I think we had some good things here.
Yep,
Hey,
yep.
everybody, if you like the content, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more or hear more. Let us know in the comments, either in YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to know more about. We're always looking to kind of get certain things out and identified and
Yep,
things
yep.
like that. And we'll go from there. So thank you so much.
Hey, appreciate it. Bye.
Bye. Hey, bye.